Hi, it's Celeste, your canary in the coal mine. So it's been about 3 weeks since I started eating again after my 40-day water-only fast. And I wanted to bring you up to date on what's going on with me since then. So about 2.5 weeks after the fast, I would say that my energy level was back up to normal. I had talked about during the fast that my endurance seemed to be going down. And it took a couple of weeks to get back to normal. And what do I mean by normal? I mean that I can lift the same amount of weight that I used to be able to lift, and I can do as many reps as I had been able to do before the fast. During the fast, I could still lift the same amount of weight, but I could only do about half as many reps before I kind of wore out. So another thing that happened was that I'm now back to being able to go up a couple of flights of stairs at the library where I volunteer without getting breathless, whereas during the fast I would get breathless maybe halfway up the stairway. So that's what I mean, that my energy level is back. Now when I broke the fast, I had been reading this one book that suggested that you restart after the fast with juicy fruit. So since it's the winter here where I live, I thought, well, citrus fruit, because that's juicy and it's what's in season right now. So that's what I started with. And I found that what happened was I went into like the munchies. I just wanted to eat everything on the planet after the first day or two. The first day or two were a little hard to get started eating again because I still didn't have much of an appetite. But then about day 2 or 3, a real appetite kicked in and I just was looking for anything to eat. And so I asked my doctor, who does alternative kinds of things and does put people on fasts, like, why did I get the munchies? And he says, well, you started eating the wrong thing, that it would have been much better to go with juicy, low sugar vegetables. And he suggested that cucumbers would have been the right thing to start back on, that the citrus fruit had too much sugar in it, and that was kicking me back into being a sugar burner, whereas the whole time that I'd been fasting, I had been a fat burner. And I think I've talked about that previously, that when you're eating all the time, especially when you're eating things with a lot of starch and sugar in them, your body is depending on that glucose that's coming in to fuel itself. But once you stop eating, or if you go on a ketogenic diet, then you're burning fat for your fuel in your body. And so as soon as my doctor told me that, I immediately went out and bought a bunch of juicy vegetables and started juicing vegetables more, and especially a lot more celery and cucumbers, anything I could think of that had a lot of water content in it. And sure enough, as soon as I did that, that hunger that I was experiencing turned right back off again, and I was fine. I could eat at a normal amount. I didn't have the munchies all the time, and I was good. So during the fast, I dropped 24 pounds of weight. I was at the high end of normal for my height, and I dropped kind of down to the low end of normal for my height. And then since starting to eat again, I knew I was going to gain weight back because my bowel was empty. So it looks like I've gained back maybe 8 pounds, 7 to 8 pounds. A little hard to say at this point because my weight isn't stable. It goes up a pound or two, goes down a pound or two. But it looks like I went from an original starting weight of 142 pounds down to a low of 118 pounds, and now I'm kind of hanging in there at the 125 to 127 weight. So that's really good for my height, and I'm really happy with that. Let's see, what else did I write? I wrote myself some notes. That's why I'm looking down here. Oh, one thing that hasn't completely come back, and this is more mental than anything else, is my desire to do aerobic exercise is pretty low right now. I don't mind doing the yoga, I don't mind doing the weight training, but I kind of dread getting on the treadmill and just grinding it out. And like I said, that is really more mental than it is physical. It's always been a struggle for me to want to do that kind of exercise. And having a break from it while I was fasting, now I kind of don't want to get back to it. But but that's not a physical problem, so I'll just have to deal with it. By the end of the first week after I started eating again, I felt pretty normal. The only thing that was wrong was that my endurance was kind of low. I got my blood work back. I told you in the previous video, the one called, what did I call it? Day 40 of water fasting. So I took the blood work right at the end of that, and I had some previous blood work that I could compare it to. And it turns out that my serum glucose level dropped, in other words, the blood sugar level dropped by about 35 points during the time I was fasting, and it hasn't come up that much. It's come up just a little bit, like maybe 5 points since I started to eat again. But this was one of the reasons why I decided to do the fast in the first place, was because my blood sugar level, when I did my little morning test on myself, was creeping upward and staying upward. And I thought at first that it was the stress of my going through my mother's dying process, but it stayed up after she died, so I was concerned about that. So I'm really happy that my blood glucose level is now down about more than 30 points, and I want to keep monitoring it and see that it stays down, because that was one of the purposes of doing this fast. The only numbers that were out of whack on my blood work after 40 days of not eating was a thing called BUN, which measures a waste product of protein digestion in the body, and that was low. And you'd expect that because I wasn't eating, so I wasn't getting any protein. And I actually was kind of joyful that it was low, because that meant I'm also not burning up my body's muscles, because that would have maybe showed up as protein burning, and I didn't have any. And so that was really good. Everything else was in line. An astounding result was my total cholesterol fell from what it had been, 13 months before, it had been 237, and now that was my total cholesterol, and now it was 159, and my HDL cholesterol, which is the good one, only fell 5 points. It had gone from 65 a year ago to 60 now. And my LDL cholesterol was where I really got the gain. It fell from 160 down to 75. So I'm like just totally overjoyed about that. And so when they do that risk profile where they compare total cholesterol to HDL ratio, now I'm at half the average risk for atherosclerosis, which is yay. So let's see, do I have something else here on? I didn't. Somebody asked me, did I do a hemoglobin A1C again? And my answer is not yet, because hemoglobin A1C is a measure of blood sugar over the previous 3 months. And so I didn't want to take the test too soon, because I had gotten a reading of just being on the borderline of being pre-diabetic, and I want more time to elapse before I do another A1C, because I would have only had a 1 month profile, and you really need 3 months to see a significant difference. So those were all. Let's see, what else have I got in my notes here? My blood pressure during the fast dropped, but I was keeping an eye on it to make sure that it didn't get too low to make me dizzy or pass out or anything. And I told you that I was putting electrolytes in my water. I was putting trace minerals and stuff like that. So when I started to notice my blood pressure going down to maybe being marginally on the borderline of too low, I just added a little more salt so that I would bring it back up again. And but the before and after the fast, blood pressure is pretty much the same. Wasn't having a blood pressure problem. During the fast and even afterward, I really feel much clearer and like it's easier to think, and my productivity has been really high on the work I'm doing on my computer. And the areas of fat that I had on my body are thinned out. They're more like normal levels. People always said, well, you don't need to lose any weight, but they don't see me without my clothes on. And so I did have more fat than I wanted on my belly and on my hips and on the backs of my arms and let's see, where I guess those are the big spots where I tend to accumulate fat. So those are all down to normal levels. When you pinch them, they're kind of normal amount of fat. They're not excessive. So that's pretty much my little report. I'm feeling particularly energetic today. I went out and shoveled snow because we had a very light snowfall today, and I wanted to get it off the sidewalk with the hope that maybe during the day, if it warms up, it'll melt off the rest of it. So there you go. I'm really anxious to see what the long-term effects of all this, of having done a 40-day fast, is going to be. But I'm really happy with how I feel right now and what my numbers say right now. So that's my report, and I'll check back in on this topic maybe a few months from now, maybe when I get that A1C level checked. So as usual, I want you to use the information that I put on these videos for your benefit. I love to tell people, I love to collect information, and I love to share with other people what the information that I've collected that I feel is the most valuable information. So as usual, I want you to get well and stay well. Thanks.